Ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight is an amazing night. We have stories, we have poems, and we have a trio. That's 1, 2, 3. Yeah, a trio of amazing performers. We have from County Cork, Maria Gillen. We have from one county or another, I'm not sure where, but in the same area or the same country. I should have asked this question before we started. We have Cathy Carson. And we have from Suffolk, the jewel of England, Jody Lee, the skinny poet. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please put your hands together and welcome our trio?
So we're playing with spotlighting today. So I'm going to bring Cathy Carson in first. Here she comes, because she's going to tell us that she's from the County Down. There she is. So, Cathy, would you like to tell us all about beautiful County Down?
Oh yes, I'm in County Down in Crossgar, Maria, just a little bit outside Downpatrick.
Very good, And now I'm actually going to spotlight our lovely Jody Lee as well. Hello, Jody. How are you?
Hello.
And can you tell us an interesting fact about where you come from?
I live in Mildenhall in Suffolk, and Pink Floyd wrote a song about aliens coming to visit Suffolk. I forget which song it was, but apparently it has one of the first alien sightings in the UK is in Mildenhall. There you go.
And here I am, Maria Gillen, from the County of Cork in the south of Ireland. So we've been having a really great time. We've been talking about resilience through stories, through story making and storytelling and the spoken word and co-creation. And there was a beautiful play co-created last night, and Jody was involved in it, as we've just heard. So stories are not just for performance, but they can hold the wisdom of an age. And we're going to have a little look at that in a minute. And we're all very excited for Cathy's debut performance here tonight. So, Cathy, would you like to tell us a little bit about what spoken word has meant to you, and maybe even during this time under the COVID cloud?
Goodness, so spoken word for me during COVID time has really taken off. It's always been something that I've done and used, writing and performing to work through anything that I've been through. But especially in this time, it's been really great to come together in a community of poets and storytellers and all across the world, really. I've been Zooming everywhere. Been Zooming Nashville and Mexico and everywhere. Just really connecting with people, and it's been amazing to connect and hear new voices as well.
Yeah, it's really shrunken the world. Cathy, I've just realised we met in cyberspace. We met in the shrunken world, yeah. in Cyber Antrim up at Liz Weir's barn,
Wow.
So, yeah, and I've been a fan ever since, as you know. So, and I'm really looking forward to your first poem of tonight. And then Jody, I can't believe that we only met 2 weeks ago.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, because even in the conversation that took an hour and 10 minutes but felt like seconds that we had before this tonight, you were talking about how poetry is like a soft road, that it brings things into manageable bite-sized pieces, and it brings us together. And we've all loved your stories of recovery and in your poetry. So can you tell us what resiliences you think poetry lends?
I think, and I can only speak for myself, of course, it really, for me, gives me a way to look at myself, at my feelings, at the way I interact. I think it can do that for everyone, but it's not good to speak for everyone. I'm learning that more and more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does. there's so much to it. The creative process in and of itself, I think, is an incredibly healthy outlet. It really is. You know, you can realize your own stories, you can deal with emotions, you can deal with such difficult things, and it can really give you perspective on them as well, which can help you build up a resilience to all sorts of things, you know.
Absolutely.
So
You know,
yeah.
I think as a drama therapist, one of my favorite things to do is to do the things that is not allowed in real life, you know, like, you know, kind of pretending to smash a window, you know, or to be in control of the weather and cause a big rainstorm, you know, these things. So I think part of the resilience of story is there's no end to the possibilities in a
Yeah.
story or in a poem, and yet it can be rooted in a time when there was very little possibilities, where the possibilities got shrunk, you know. So right now it's very difficult for us not to be in front of live audiences, but look at us finding the spotlight feature and being able to have a chat like this. It's great. I love it, you know. So now that we've spoken a little bit about the resilience of our beautiful art form, I think it would be brilliant to hear some of the stories from the art form. So Cathy, we're going to start with you, and I'm also going to tell you we're going to end with you at the very end. So you're going to have the last few words as well. So if you can, you know, be preparing in your heart and your mind, what will be you've so many to choose from. You've so many gems, Cathy Carson. So I can't wait to see what gem comes out, you know, and I'm going to remove myself and Jody from the spotlight. And then afterwards, Jody, you'll be next. So be getting ready and seeing what the red thread tugs into your heart when we're all working like this together. So I'm going to remove myself first, and then we're going to remove Jody, and then Cathy, you can take it away.
Isn't this amazing, this spotlighting business? I'm loving this. So the first one that I'm going to do tonight is one about growing up. I make no secret of I grew up in a home with domestic violence, and throughout my life there have been people who have made a huge difference to me in those times. But the strange thing is that they didn't make a difference at the time. They made a difference many years later. I wasn't in a position to take help at that time. I wasn't in a position where I could receive it. I wasn't in a position where I could respond to it. So the things that they said and the things that they did were things that I kept with me all my life, and I was able to pick up with them later on. So if there are any teachers out there listening, if you're working with someone and you don't think you're getting through, please don't ever think that. Even if it doesn't happen in your classroom in front of you, plant some seeds that they can grow later. And this little story is about a teacher who planted seeds with me called Mrs. Harvey. And I'm really pleased to say that we're now friends. I've got in touch with her years later, and she's had me back into the school that I was expelled from. So it's amazing how life turns full circle sometimes. So this little story is about Mrs. Harvey. For you, Miss Harvey, I did my homework on the bus. Now, let me be clear that I did not do school. School days were spent at home, recovering, healing from wounds inflicted by my father, while my mother, wounded herself and complicit in the lie, would write on this notepaper gifted to her every year for her birthday: "Dear teacher, please excuse Cathy's period of absence from school. She has been taking care of me as I have been unwell. Yours sincerely, Mrs. Gurley." But those letters were never dated, never specific, which meant that a week off to let bruising turn from purple to brown to green to yellow to shadow could be extended by me, to allow for long walks in parks and trips into Belfast city centre, and an unbelievably skilled waste of time. On the first day of third year, you stood at the top of the room in my English lesson, and you were smaller than all of us. 23, 24 years old perhaps, and I remember thinking that you dressed like my gran. Cathy, read the next paragraph, you said. The sniggering started instantly. I brushed my fringe from my eyes and I locked my gaze on you, and every part of me sent you a silent message. Please, miss, do not make me read. Back then, my consonants multiplied and my vowels just disappeared, and syllables had edges and paragraphs meant tears, and they sent it again. Please, miss, do not make me read. And the nod, when it came, was almost imperceptible and followed by, Tracy Cassidy, read the next paragraph. Now you set us homework, but I did not do, you had never done homework. When your home is dangerous, when every part of your being is focused on not being hurled against a wall or trying to process hours of verbal abuse, homework simply does not, cannot happen. But for you, Miss Harvey, I did my homework on the bus. In other subjects, I was at best disengaged, at worst disruptive, and letters were sent home to my mother, but she had other things on her mind. But even on the days when I mitched, I would stride into English 11 a.m. Mondays and Thursdays with the untouchable swagger of Al Capone, and you would read my workout to the class. These bright red A's accompanied by smiles and affirmations until one day the homework wasn't worthy of a bright red A. The cup had been slammed 3 times against the table at 2 a.m., calling me from my bed, and 6 hours of shaming and berating and humiliation had followed, so that the essay on the bus, it was virtually incoherent. God, looking back now, I can see that you tried to be so kind, placing it on my desk with the D facing down now. I know that you can do better than that, you smiled. But at 14, I heard criticism, rejection, betrayal even. Sense of exposure was brutal because suddenly you could see all that my father could see, and I could not look at you. The following Thursday, with hurt turned to defiance, I sat at the back and glared at you until you reddened. I handed in the homework. The following Monday, you kept me back after class, and I stood face aflame, eyes blistering from biting back tears, and I can still see you now, with your hands clasped, crouching so low that your face looked up into mine, and that dimple on your chin, like the press of a thumb. I was so disappointed not to get homework from you, Cathy. Do you know that I keep yours to the end? When I've read all the rest, I put the kettle on and I grab a chocolate biscuit and sit down to read yours. I was so disappointed when it wasn't there last night. I remember the swell in my chest, the rush of something warm from my feet to my forehead, fighting back the smile and feeling like I would tell you the truth in that moment. But you didn't know that you should ask. You're so smart, you said. You can do anything you want. But my insides were stuffed full of my father's words. Backward, retard, you can't string 2 words together, so there was no room for your words at that time. I would be 22 when I find them again, hidden like seeds in pockets of myself, long since forgotten but once planted. A-levels were followed by 1 degree, then another, till I no longer had room inside myself for my father's words. On the last day of 3rd year, my school report was accompanied by a letter which went something like, Dear Mr. and Mrs. Gurley, we are concerned about Cathy's attendance and behaviour. She has had frequent and extended periods of absence from school, and when she does attend, she is often disruptive, at times aggressive towards both pupils and staff. Her English teacher reports that she shows both promise and interest in this subject, but this is not reflected in other areas. and we are keen to discuss her future at the school at your earliest convenience. But for you, Miss Harvey, I did my homework on the bus. Thank you. Thanks, Maria.
That was fantastic.
Thank you, John.
And I was reminded, if I can drop in with a little anecdote here, when my wife and I taught when she was alive in the same school, and she'd worked with this one family, and the truant officer knew them well, and he was never oppressive. We got one girl through to the last year. She was never going to finish it, but he thought it was a great victory that we got her through that for. And the younger brother was actually doing the homework under incredibly difficult circumstances. And one day his science book, the dog had got it or something, and it got spoiled. And he brought it in and he handed it in, and it was a young science teacher who knew nothing. And he sent him to the head teacher. And that science teacher had no idea that boy was the first boy in the family to even do the homework.
Wow.
Oh.
And I mean, we sorted that out.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd drop that in there.
Yeah.
John, that is so lovely. And I just want to let you know, Cathy, that while that poem was going on, I was watching the faces and how enthralled people were, and and how the response is a guttural one, John, isn't it? It's like, I recognize that. I recognize it,
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Maria. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much. We're going to release John from the spotlight, and then we're going to release my lovely Cathy, who we'll be bringing back very shortly for number 2. And now we're going to bring in Jody. So here we go with Jody. So Jody, I'm just going to get your reaction first, because I think one story borrows another. So I'm just wondering, where did that land for you?
Yeah, that really resonated with that. That was beautiful and so well performed as well. That was just sucking me in more and more and more with each word. It was lovely. It's yeah, I mean, I had all sorts of troubles myself in school as well. And often all that anger, those feelings, people don't know what's going on at home, and you feel you don't trust people. I didn't trust my teachers. I had an issue with authority. So even if they were trying to help me, just like you said, there's that breakdown of trust where, like, no, I don't want this help. I can't trust it. You can't help me. You don't know what I'm going through. Whatever it was, all these feelings come up. So yeah, it was beautiful, really beautiful.
Well, I'm going to get out of your way now. I love Jody's work as well, and I can't wait to see what you bring us.
Okay, well, I have landed on which one I'm going to do, which I said I hadn't before. And I think the theme, we're talking about resilience, and my story involves a lot of recovery. I am an addict. I've been in recovery. I figured out it's actually 18 years now. I keep saying 17 years, but it's been another year. I stopped counting a little while ago, but 18 years since I started it, but it's been just over 2 years now since I've been totally drink and drug free. And it brings in a whole new aspect into my writing, I suppose. It definitely does. And this is a poem I wrote. I probably wrote it about a year ago, I think. And I haven't had a chance to perform it much because obviously we've been in lockdown. So it's fairly new to perform. It's been on stage once. I'm going to have to read it from my book. But this is a poem about recovery. And even when you go into it, there's still so many issues. It requires a real resilience. When you have friends that's still engaged in drinking and taking drugs, good friends as well, there are some that you can let go of, but there are some that are good friends and some that you can't help but bump into sometimes. And you have to really find inner strength to go into those situations. You know, it took me a long time to do it. This poem is called Water's Fine. Here comes that question. Would you like a drink, mate? The sight, the smell, the sound, the taste, this whole scene makes me salivate. It's as familiar to me as my ABC, but I must refuse and choose whether I explain why. Explain that if I take that ride, if I awake that beast inside, that it could consume my very life. It could ignite every version of the person that I am and leave in its passage just the ashes of a man. So do I? Tell him, I mean, I should be proud of my recovery, right? Proud of my strength, proud of my fight, proud of my perseverance to recover every part of me, to discover my true self from within that muddy sea. So I do. I say, no thanks, I'm in recovery. Then he looks at me like I just landed in this very spot from another planet, like I'm not a man, but a Martian, an exposed fluctuation in the time-space continuum, a tear in the very fabric of his reality, a complete irregularity. See, he is confused. To refuse a drink does not make sense to him. It's only one drink, how harmful could it be? But I've no time to explain what one drink is to me. That one drink is just a tease. It's just the start, the first step onto a path which leads into chaos, darkness, into a maelstrom that barters for my very sense of self. And I don't have time to say that it's one drink today, which is never just one anyway, but tomorrow that wouldn't change. I would say, well, I've already had some and it wasn't too bad, right? I remember the night I didn't fight, I got home in good time, so hey, it's okay to drink today. Man, it would make me feel so much better. My whistle always sounds so much better when it's wetter. And so I would. And this pattern would unfold tenfold. It would take hold of my rationale and tear it apart like a wet paper towel. Then my drunk mind, once consigned to the liquor, would not feel satisfied, would not simply settle until I'd added to that high, till I was flying like a shuttle, shooting off full throttle to heights unknown. And I don't want to say, even that would grow. It would take hold, unfold, grow bold, that I would no longer remain, feel no love, no fear, no pain, nothing but an unquenchable appetite for destruction, for my destruction, an infliction, a malfunction that rules my base function and takes over my very will to survive. That I could be lost for weeks, months, years, caught in a complex catacomb of tears, tearing apart every routine part of life, just to pursue an unattainable high. I am an addict, a tragic captive to harmful habits. I'm one of the 10% who seeks blissful distraction through exterior transactions. I fall slave to my consumption if it is not kept in check. Anytime, any stressors fire my neurotransmitters and cortisol courses through my mind. I want to find the opposing side, to ride a tide of dopamine in ways seen as obscene, to flood my mind in a serotonin sea and stray from any civilized behavior. I seek out my demons and turn them into saviors and worship them. I worship them until they're light. I worship them with fervor, and I serve them until my light is dim, until my frame is frail and thin, until my life is torn down from within, until there's nothing left but them. And I don't want that. They've already had so much. I don't want to feel their touch. I don't want my light to fade, my true self to cascade like a flimsy house of cards. No, I want to shine hard, to drown out my shadows with me, to be my absolute pure self. I may not be perfect, but I don't belong in hell. See, I just want to live my life, to live with truth, with love, with light, and take each day at a time. But I don't have time to explain all of this. So I just say, thanks, mate. Water's fine.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Thank you.
you're getting such a reaction for that, Jody, you know, and I know when you're in it, you can't see all the faces, but all the hands are up and everybody is, you know, kind of coming in with beautiful comments. Now, we never asked at the start, but maybe at the end, I'm going to bring the audience in. I'm going to tell one story tonight instead of two, and bring the audience in at the end, because the reaction to these performances tonight is so big, you know. One thing that I really loved about this performance was that the rhythm, and how the rhythm went to crescendo and came down and went up and came down, felt like internal head talk that we all do to one another, you
Yeah,
know, and the holding of two opposite energies. I love you, you know, get
yeah,
away from me, you're bad for me, but I love you, you know, and that really is what it
yeah.
is
I,
like,
I
you know.
I love that you noticed that. Yeah, it was a big part of working on it, and I think I always loved stories, but poetry in particular. It's something that working with the words and the structure and the rhyme of words, and it's something that goes, as John will tell you, that goes throughout a lot of my poetry.
Yeah,
I can't help. I love rhyming. I love it. I love internal rhymes, external rhymes. I like breaking them up, and yeah. So it's something that I really loved writing that poem as well, which is
yeah,
when you know you're onto something, and like,
absolutely.
oh, this is exciting. This is
Yeah,
exciting. Yeah,
and part of the connectivity to the hearts and the minds and the souls of your audience is that
definitely.
rhythm, and it is that word smithery, and it is that, you know, because the voice has a particular tone, the voice of addiction, and I think you just captured it. It was really good. And I see Cathy going, yes, yes, yes. So I'm actually going to bring her in here so that we can talk a little bit to the art of poetry, because she's also an artist. So there you go, Cathy. So those beautiful things that you're saying, you can say them out loud now.
Wow, Jody, that was incredible. Just your ability to stand in that and communicate it. Wow, it created in me a new sense of empathy and understanding for what it must be like to be in that space. That's powerful stuff. Well done. Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Yeah,
yeah, it was just amazing. And also and accurate, you know. I love
Mhm.
the searing honesty of these two poets. Both of you have heard me say that to you, you know. And I just, when we were talking about having you on, Cathy, and then I heard Jody, I just knew there'd be a tandem rhythm between your work as well, you know. So, and I think that that is the chain of searing honesty, you know. It's like, you know, I'm going to tell you exactly how it is, and we're going to continue with that now. So I'm going to release from the spotlight our fantastic Jody and myself, and Cathy's going to give us her next poem. Go on, Cathy.
So this next little piece is about my mum. It's about my mum going through dementia quite young. Mum very sadly got dementia at 48. And this little story has been told many, many times, but very few people know the backstory. The backstory really is that when you're growing up in a home where domestic violence takes place, relationships are really difficult. Everyone is in survival mode and doing their own ways of surviving. And so attachment is really, really difficult. And there was something that happened in my mum's journey with dementia that allowed me to connect with her in a way that I'd never been able to connect before. And I'm really, really grateful for that gift. So what I really wanted to do with this story was to take something that some people might think is quite sad and focus in on something that was really beautiful, really powerful, and really heart-changing for me, and magnify that part of the story so it became a medicinal story or a healing story for me and for others. So this little piece is called 17. You know, on the way to your room, I heard the kinks sing out. I'm thinking of the days, so I knew that you were up. I knocked twice on a door that wore your name in red and green capitals, and I gently pushed, and you were sat in the corner in this high back chair, only half sealed in this life-size cardboard cutout of Elvis Presley with his finger pointed to the ceiling, dressed in a white and gold all in one. And it was September. But the Elvis calendar on your wall said July because that was your favorite picture of him. You told me once that you kissed that picture every night, then denied it the next day, but you blushed crimson. So I knew it was true. But you were fidgety that day, twisting a tortured tissue into knots and unraveling and starting again. Harsh things. Good, you said. But it was an awkward reply. Tight. I love your hair, I tried. And you tucked a strand behind your ear with the shyness of a 17-year-old who hadn't been used to compliments. So they never quite landed. And you never got to hold them. And my head was full of things to say, but I had learned this was your time to show me who you were. How's Sam? I asked, struggling not to grin because I knew what was coming, and you looked up. And there was the sunshine, the upturned corners of young love. I saw him last night, you said, pulling your fingers across your lips like a zip because Sam was our secret. We went to Raffles, the best chips in the world. Have you been? God, the question was as earnest as you, full of expectation, a longing to keep this conversation going. So, the best chips, I replied. I think I want to marry him. And you glanced round at Elvis as if to check if he was listening. Now, what would Elvis say to that? Och, Elvis doesn't even know that I exist, you said. I remember thinking that was his loss. And that for such a long time, I hadn't known either. Did I tell you how I met Sam? Oh God, you had. So many times I could have repeated it verbatim, but I'll let you tell me again. How he waited for you outside the factory where you stitched hankies, how you made him wait 8 weeks for a peck in the cheek, how you lay awake at night, wondering how long you could keep the secret from your mother, who was strict, you had told me. Leather belt strict. You had been going strong. Now, that phrase still makes me laugh. For 10 weeks now. And he was the most amazing kisser. But you got distracted after that. The music had stopped and you started looking for a tissue, and I passed you one from my handbag. And I kissed your cheek and said goodbye. God, I pressed play on the CD player as I left, and I stood outside the door for a long time, forehead and palms pressed against the cool of the wood, wondering how my heart can soar and break at the same time. It had started with post-it notes that littered every surface of the living room, these luminous squares of green and yellow that yelled repeated commands. Pay window cleaner, pay credit union, ring Cathy. Pay window cleaner, pay credit union, ring Cathy, except the window cleaner never got paid, nor the credit union. He never, ever rang me. And then there were the things that I told you that you forgot. And the things that you told me 1,000 times. That day I turned up to visit you during election time. You closed the door in my face. You told me you were sick of Sinn Féin canvassers and you weren't voting that year. And the time you bought me chocolates for my birthday and you left the room, came back in, thanked me for them and ate them all. Every single one, like even the coffee ones, and you hated coffee. And the phone calls in the wee hours of the morning to tell me that you were worried. Dad hadn't come home. But Dad had been dead for 5 years. Oh, there were countless visits to the doctor. Diagnosis of loneliness, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, psychosis, but none of them were helpful because none of them were right. 10 years in elderly care told me what this was. This was dementia. But you were 48. You were found one night wandering in the rain in your nightdress, barefoot, soaked through. It took 3 months in a unit for them to decide that this was early onset Alzheimer's. 3 seconds for me to decide that you would live with me. On the first night, you had a delirium that had you ripping the curtains from the rails, kicking, biting, screaming, thrashing, spitting, unable to find the bathroom. You soiled yourself and you cried like a child. So I took you to your home, where you attacked me in the night thinking I was an intruder. You thought I was stealing from you. Christ, you phoned the police. So finally, after guilt that sucked the very core from me, came an acceptance of sorts. I couldn't continue. I placed you into care, where you flatlined into a shell of all that you had been, and I will admit that visits became painful, less frequent. I consoled myself with the fact that you would not remember whether I had been to visit or not in years past. I had already lost you. A phone call came to work one day to tell me that you had been admitted to hospital with a chest infection, where amidst your rage and delirium, they told me it was terminal lung cancer, and they transferred you to hospice. You were 59. I visited one day during music therapy. I stood frozen in the doorway as I watched you dance in your chair to the music of the Kinks as much as your frailty would allow, and you were lit up with youth and joy and something I had never seen in you, hope. As I approached, you turned to me with your face full of mischief and you said, I love the Kinks. Do you like them? I'm Kate Newlove. What's your name? You had introduced yourself with your maiden name. Something inside me folded as I realized that this is who you were before my father broke you. But even in the moment, I knew I was being given a gift. I was meeting my mum before she was my mum. So I played along. I sat beside you. You told me you were 17, that you were dating a boy called Sam. And we talked about the music you loved and the places you went to and all the things your mother wouldn't let you do, and you made me laugh so hard. We established a routine of sorts. I would arrive and find you vacant, unengaged, and I would play the music of the Kinks, and there you were. 17-year-old Keg knew, and God, I fell in love with you, with your cheek and your charm, with your infectious laugh and your insatiable passion for the Kinks. On the night I lost you the second time, the nurse said you'd been distressed, that you had been calling out, and unable to settle you, she'd put on the music of the Kinks and left the room. She'd gone back a few minutes later just to turn the volume down and find you gone. It still tickles me to think that as the Kinks sang out, oh yeah, you really got me, someone came and got you. You know, the medical records will say that you died aged 59, but me, I say different, because you see, the Kinks were playing. So you died age 17. Thank you, Maria.
I'm still reeling from that one, so I'm taking a second to come in. Oh, Cathy. Oh, I was listening to your beautiful poem. Every time I hear it, it gets me in the heart, you know. And I was looking around at the faces, and they were all, we were like a sea of coming in and going out to the screens in the rhythm of what you were saying and the soul recognition for what that's like, because you just don't tell tales. It's like you transport us to being there. And I
Thank you.
just loved that. So now I'm just going to bring Jody in. Just going to add his spotlight here. And Jody,
Wow.
I'm actually a bit without words. So can you give us a bit of a reaction to that?
Wow. Just wow. I don't, I'm a bit stuck for words as well, if I'm
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
It's performed with such searing honesty as well, and we talked about this before,
yeah.
like the authenticity of that, and it's all over your face as you perform it. It's right there, and that is beautiful. It just connects so powerfully. I mean, you can only imagine, and I can't, something like that, to go through something like that. I haven't had to, but the way you tell it, like I say, it's just all right there. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Wow.
you.
It was
The
amazing.
magic illuminating moment in what can be a tough, dark space. And it was done so believably that we all went, yeah, we can see that, you know. Oh, this is great. I'm thinking that these chats in between the poetry is really important for us as performers as well, because we're missing the reaction from the audience, you know.
Yeah.
And when I'm sitting back watching the audience react to you guys, it almost feels what it felt like for me to be in a live situation. So, Cathy, I think it's really important for you to hear from Jody, and from Jody to hear from you about what that poetry is like. And we're the voice of the audience at the moment, but we're going to bring everybody in at the end. So if you don't want to be on camera to the people in the audience at the end, you can stop video, but you can still see everything and you can still hear everything, because I think this conversation is important. And with that, I'm going to release the beautiful Cathy from the spotlight, and I'm going to release myself, and we're going to hear one more time from our Jody.
Okay. I'd like to do two shorter poems, if that's okay. So I'll do the first one and then go straight into the second one. The first one, I had thought about bringing a different one, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a much older one, which is it's about addiction, and it's one of the first really honest and with compassion as well poems I wrote about heroin addiction in particular, and kind of the hopelessness around it. But you know how that it is hopeless. It's hopeless for people who are in it, and it's important to remember that, you know, that they were children once, and they're people, and they've been caught in this hopeless situation. So without further ado, I'll do it. It's called Eternal Entomology. Sweet, brown, sticky lays the lazy legless beetle. His tail wisps to nothing as it's licked by metallical tongue. The dull mirrored surface tilts and ushers his short pathway under lazy-eyed fiends who watch him closely as he runs. Drooping watchers cherish this chase, cherish the shine of his smooth, faceless face, and all fall under his hypnotical spell, with little care for their loves or themselves. They just run and they run and they run and they run till they've had their black fill in their tire track lungs. Then they find other ways to continue this game of life and death. They choose other tools that rely not on breath, utensils and belts and cylindrical sharp things that push through their barriers with the smallest of stings, and the beetle aboard gives them lead, flightless wings. With each gentle push, they decay to his needs, because he narrowly grows, but he constantly feeds. They'll bleed for this syrup that now fills their bloodstream as they live on life's edge in their cardboard box dreams. The dead, the hopeless, the rotten and scum. Or brother, or sister, or father, or mum. Who knows? Who asks? Who cares? Not many, friend. But for each penny they spend, one is taken for their fake golden ends. yet still they run, and still they chase, and never they tire. And though he sits right before their face, they will never catch that beetle with their breath and their fire. No, they will never catch that beetle. They'll never feel that life's desire. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to do my next one as well. We can chat about both of them afterwards, of course, if you want. Now, the next one is a much more recent one, and it's I love performing this one. There's points of it where like powerful emotion comes up, because it's really about judgment, I think, and tonight's theme is about resilience, and resilience is something that is incredibly important in all walks of life, but it isn't always possible as well, you know. And a type of resilience is knowing that we are fallible and that we go through hard times. Knowing that is a form of resilience in itself, I think, and being able to accept that in other people as well. We never know what's going on for other people, and everybody goes through difficult times. This poem is called Humans Being. For some people, it is difficult simply to exist. For some people, getting through the day is like working a double shift without a manager, without staff, without any support at all. Some people feel all alone, stood in a bustling mall. Some people feel they need to scream but cannot find their voice. Some people choose to be strong each day when they never had a choice. Some people hide their feelings with a smile on their lips because some people taught them a stiff upper lip is the way some people live. Some people long to ask for help but can't even hold your eyes. And some people put on a grown-up show while inside their child hides, frightened, confused, and alone. They've never known how to fill that space despite how much they've grown. Some people cage their heart away when they long to set it free. And some people risk their heart each day and pin it to their sleeves. Some people open up their hearts and live their life to serve. Then some people see them as easy marks and not as they deserve. Because some people think that greed is needed to get themselves ahead. They carve a path through kinder hearts, not caring where they tread. Some people count their blessing while dressing in the dirt. And some people medicate their minds when stressing makes it hurt to think, hurt to talk, hurt to be. See, we can rant and shout and scream, but we only need to breathe. Some try their best in every test, yet still feel lost at sea. And some people struggle and get called a mess because that's all some people see. But in truth, all of these people, they are just people like you and me. See, some people, it amounts to us. And good or bad, we're just humans being. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. I think you're, the overwhelm of beautiful emotion from poetry reminds me why poetry needs to be spoken. Like reading a poem, like if you hear someone reading the same poem, John O'Donoghue's poetry comes to my mind because I've heard so many different people read his poetry, or Maya Angelou, and the person takes a different sense from it and puts it out through the way they say the poem. And Jody, yeah, that was beautiful. And being human, just gorgeous. You're getting beautiful reactions from our audience, and we're going to bring them in at the end, which makes me realize that we're going to get caught for time. Can you believe that our time has just gone like that? Feels
really
like
is.
minutes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
it
I'm
does.
going to
You don't have a limit.
we
we
don't
can
tonight.
keep going forever. No, sorry.
Oh, that's great. So John, we don't have to finish at 7. Is that right?
Ali might kick us out if you carry on till midnight.
Okay, I'm going to take that.
No. Actually, 7:30 would be great. But,
Okay.
hour and a half would be fantastic. But
That's brilliant because
don't worry about anything. Just
thank you, John.
yeah, this is an evening for the soul.
It really is.
Let us explore our souls.
Oh, definitely. I was actually holding back on my reaction because I was thinking our time is limited, and it's so good to hear that it's not. So I'm actually going to bring John in because I love the way John has brought us all together. So I'm just bringing John in there for a second, and I'm going to say, John, people talk about meeting you in the woods and meeting you on walks and about missing that during this time, because that's when people could talk to you with the searing honesty that has seemed to have become a red thread of tonight, and which is a real resilience, So with you as that man to be met in the woods, can you just kind of tell us what you're thinking about this gorgeous poetry from Jody and from Cathy?
Well, there's two parts of me. There is one that is totally absorbed. There is one thinking, oh, how amazing if we could put them out as a pair and have them tour England and Ireland. And I know they both got commitments, and Kaz is a frontline nurse, and that might be really difficult. But I just think that would make a fantastic because what they're doing is really important. And I don't want to knock anything, but I find the more you listen to, and it's same with music and everything, the less excites you.
Yeah.
Especially at the moment, because we're just getting this, whole bombardment through Zoom and everything else, and I love performance poetry. And for every person who comes to it new and listen to it new, it'll be exciting for them, whoever they're listening to. But you get to a point where you listen for fresh voices and fresh angles and whatever art is, I kind of like it to be a bit functional, a bit, I like it to peel back the skins of the onion, or the onion skin, or whatever it is. And Cathy and Jody do that, and they do that with sincerity. They're not looking from outside, they're looking from in, out, with a universal sort of aspect. Right, I'm going to shut up.
Oh, I loved that, and I really love that you think that they go with one another as well, because we did that on the fly, and it's one thing that I love about the World Storytelling Cafe, So myself and Cathy were going to have this space, and then I heard Jody, and I was like, oh, I think he would really fit, and you've just said yes. John is the man of yes, let's do it, and look how it's worked out. It's brilliant, So thank you so much, John. I'm actually going to bring Cathy in now as well. So we're going to add Cathy to the spotlight. So all four of us are there together. So Cathy, you're going to have a last word poem. I didn't think that I would have time for a story, but John now tells me that I have. So it's going to be a completely different rhythm. And it's like Sesame Street Lango. One of these things is not like the others. One of these things is definitely not the same, but it comes from the same pool. And John and I come from that pool of medicinal story. Like you have medicinal poetry, and I think all four of us realize that these stories have a root in humanity and human nature, and resilience, So if you just look for the light and follow it, then amazing things can happen. And we stop believing in stories. We stop believing that there's possibilities out there, But look at the four of us having a conversation on this new technology. Isn't it absolutely amazing, So this time I wanted all my friends on the screen with me, because this time, in such salubrious company, I'm going to tell a story. So I'm going to actually release you all now from the spotlight, and I'm going to tell you where my story is coming from. So this story actually comes from working in co-creation in story circles through the COVID cloud. So in my new work in Kerry Writers Museum, we've been looking at the silver linings to the COVID cloud. And one of them are the fantastic friends that I've made under that cloud during this last year, including Cathy, including John Rowe, including now Jody as well, and all of the lovely people that are here. I've been talking to the two the Thompson twins as well. So what a silver lining. But also sometimes the unsayable can be said in a story, or the searingly true that hurts to look at its light can be put into a story or a poem, and therefore made available to us. And this story came from co-creation in story circles as we sat at our screens and improved. So thank you so much for the human spirit. Crahor was living in a beautiful part of Cork. It had big wide fields and a little copse of trees where the animals were so friendly that they'd come right up to you and look deep into your soul. He loved it there. The days were endless. He'd sing songs to himself. He'd be king of the castle, or he'd be leader in the game. And then, in his memory, his parents started talking about moving, about going to the city for work. And in his memory, it was like he was plucked, kicking and screaming from his big, wide fields in West Cork and brought up to the city where everything was constrained and constricted, and there was rules and regulations. And when he went to school, they changed his name. They couldn't get their tongue around Crahor. "We'll call him Connor," they said. "Sure, 'tis the same thing anyway." But it wasn't like that for Crahor. And over the years of living in the city, he felt the weight of it. He felt how people were a small bit broken-hearted, how they didn't look into your eyes the way they did in the country, how nobody sang in their day. And then it came to the year 2020, and people were wearing masks and looking down. And it was like everybody was ghosts. It was like he was living in a dream world, but it wasn't a nice dream. He'd never forget the day that lockdown was lifted the first time. He was passing that little crystal shop in Cork City, Dervish it's called. It's full of crystals and angels and incense and happiness. And there was a little woman sitting on the windowsill, and she looked right at him and she twinkled at him. She had so many wrinkles that her face was moving, and she wasn't wearing any mask. He went over with his mask on, but his eyes were there. His eyes looked straight into hers, and she said, "I'm Fia Bon! I'm Fia Bon!" And he said, "No, my name is Crahor." And he couldn't believe that he'd used his old name, his real name. And she looked at him and she winked and she said, "On Fia Bon, boy, on Fia Bon." And she put out her gnarled hands, and he took it. And she took his hand down and she squashed it just in that fat little bit near the thumb. And the contact made him smile. And she laughed at him and he laughed back. And although nothing had changed in the world, his day had changed. He felt lighter. And as he was going across the bridge to walk up the rock steps, he was singing an old song to himself. A vaca to my vocalin, my vornin og my hay machine. A vaca to my vocalin, is igual she is on board. People looked at him and he didn't care. And then he remembered that he hadn't sung in his day in the longest time. And he remembered his grandmother back there in West Cork and her singing away, singing that song as she peeled the spuds. And an urge came over him. He wanted brown bread. He wanted his mother's brown bread. So he took down the big bowl, because you have to have a big bowl to make proper brown bread. And he threw in all the ingredients and he moved them around with his hand. And soon the smell of brown soda bread was permeating throughout the house. And he took down the smeradova, the blackberry jam. He'd picked those blackberries himself, because nobody was out in Cork City. He had the blackberry bushes to himself, and they were fat and juicy, and they tasted like freedom. And he slathered it in generous amounts on that brown bread. He went to bed then, but the big full moon, the cold moon, the last moon of the year, she wouldn't let him sleep. She tickled his feet and played with his spirit until laughing he got up, and he went out of the house for the first time without a mask. Sure, there was no need for it, because there wasn't a soul out. He walked down the rock steps, he crossed the River Lee, and on the magic mist of Cork, on Ceodriachta, it began to curl up from the Lee. It began to invade all of the streets, and it seemed to be showing him the way. And he walked down the western road to where the river was silver under the moon, tinkling and playing there and inviting him to come closer. And the mist, it seemed to have a breath in it. It seemed to be going in and out. And then he saw her next to the tree, playing at the edges of her, the mist, on Fia Bawn, the white deer. Not one word was spoken between the two of them, but he understood her. He understood her deep in her heart as she whispered from her soul, Crohor mo cree, Crohor mo kushla, Crohor tar ansha. Crohor, my heart. Crohor, so important to me that you are the pulse in my blood. Crohor, come here. And he was powerless not to. Drawn in he was to her dark eyes. And as he moved closer, the mist moved at the edges of her, and she turned from the white deer into a beautiful woman with a long white dress, long dark hair, and deep blue black eyes. Tell me, she said, tell me, without saying one word. And he said, oh, it feels like the world is broken-hearted, broken in its soul. People don't look at one another anymore. And she said, oh, is that the way it is in Éire, in Ireland, in the heart of the world? Ah, my vocal, ah, my boy, it won't last like that forever, for this too shall pass. It is a big wheel, and it will turn again. And he got comfort from her words. And then she said, would you like to come to Tiernan Og, to wait it out until happiness once more taps on the shoulder of Éire? and in reply, he put out his hand and stepped into the mist. Sinead, that's my story. So now I'm going to bring in, this is lovely now because I get to talk to people about my story. So I'm bringing in Cathy and I'm looking for Jody. Where are you, Jody? There you are. So I'm just going to bring Jody in as well. So lads, that's a different kind of art form. What did you think?
Oh, beautiful. I loved it. Just the connection you can still feel. I don't think it matters whether a story is real or invented or fantasy. I think what matters is what you push through it and what you carve out with it. And I think the catharsis and the connection is still the same because of what you managed to push through that. That was incredible. And this little nurse is glad to hear it's coming to an end. I need to step towards that. So, yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for that. Beautiful.
That's it. Like, we'd be in the story circles and we'd be saying, what character can we have? And it's an everyman character, and Crahor is the everyman. And people are talking about how the world has become a very crushing, stressful place to be. So we were trying to paint how that would be, and everybody had their own way of painting that. And in my mind's eye, it was a boy that was plucked from the country and dropped into the city, transplanted to a place that didn't feel like his own, you know. So yeah, and then the wisdom that we seem to be disconnected from. So in the old days, it was myth and legend, you know, and the Fia Bán is a huge part of Celtic mythology. So it was like reintroducing, you know, and sometimes it's as simple as breaking the tension and looking at something beautiful for a few minutes. So you can be having a really horrible day, and then you can get immersed in some beauty, like a Cathy poem, you know, or a Jody rhythm. And then suddenly, like it says in the story, nothing has really changed, but it has changed for you. And Cathy, you rightly said that's catharsis. And I love the power of catharsis. Yeah. You know.
It's really beautiful. I think like in any story, whether they're fiction or not, there's truth in there. There's all these elements of truth, and that one, you know, there is, and always has been, it's been throughout time, that sense of loss of connection. I think a lot of people do feel it. The way that humanity has moved and evolved as well, there is that loss of connection, and it's connection with nature and things like that in so many stories. Like the author Neil Gaiman, his story American Gods, it's very much about that sort of idea with the new gods, technology and all of this and media, and people are worshipping that, but there's a real loss of connection with those old mythic gods and nature and earth and water and all these things. So yeah, it was brilliant. It's beautiful.
Like I've been interested in the indigenous populations, and I cannot believe the surge in them, you know, kind of in the Native American people, in the Eskimos, in New Zealand, and the Maori people, and they're all saying the same thing right now. They're saying, please listen to us. We need to reconnect to Earth, you know.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a lot behind that in how we can heal ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take ours out. So myself and Jody out now. We're going to give Cathy last word, and then we're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to hand back to John Rowe. So so removing the spotlight from myself and from Jody.
Thank you, Maria. So yeah, you're talking.
Sorry, Cathy.
You're okay. You were talking about creating stories that aren't necessarily true, and using myth and legend and how that can still be a catharsis. So this little story isn't true. And there are aspects of it that are true, but I really wanted to home in on just one night that happened in my life. And I was about 8 years old, and there was a really bad event that happened at home with the violence, and I was sent to stay in foster care just for one night with this lady, and we had an interaction that has always stayed with me. So I really wanted to home in on that and see, can I grow that? And can I make that mean something to myself and to other people? And how can I use that story? So there are parts of this that aren't true and parts of it that are true. And it's really about resilience. It's really about owning your experience and being able to stand in it and pushing yourself forward with that experience rather than letting it hold you back. So standing in your own courage. And it's called Lightning. You know, I still love the thrill of a storm, that flash of blue and white as the sky takes a picture of the earth below, that blade thin line between fear and excitement when anything feels possible and you are more alive than you have ever been, that rogue bolt that reaches down so that just for a second the sky is tethered to the earth. Oh, but most of all, I love that it reminds me of Lisa. I arrived at Lisa's home just before midnight, ushered in by a social worker who was too grateful, too apologetic, and voice pitched too high. And Lisa said I was tiny for 8, dressed in superhero pajamas, 2 sizes too small. Head bowed, shoulders rolled with the weight of all I was carrying, eyes dark and deep as planted seeds, and she bundled me to bed with a careful choreography of care and distance, reassurance and space that she had mastered over time. But at 2 a.m., Lisa was not sleeping. She was watching the storm. She was listening for me. The first boom of thunder, the smallest of whimpers escaped me, and she was there, lifting me from the bed, smelling like apples, and carrying me down the stairs. And she sat me on a sofa facing patio doors. She placed a rug across my knees, and as I curled around her like a comma, we watched the lightning dance across the sky. What makes it happen? I asked her. It's electricity, she said. What, like plugs? Well, kind of, but more like the wires inside the plugs. But electricity is all around us, even inside you. That's how your brain tells your body what to do. It sends messages all through your body like lightning. Like superpowers? I asked her. And Lisa smiled wide. Like superheroes? And Lisa laughed in a way that I didn't yet know that grown-ups could laugh. I padded towards the patio doors, and cupping my face to watch the storm, I felt like I could do anything. And later, as she carried me to bed, I clung to her with such force, bone on bone, that Lisa said there were bruises in the morning. Lisa's bruises faded, but the marks that she left on me stayed. Because growing up, she taught me to speak up even though my voice shook, to run even when it felt like my legs were not my own, to stand in the truth of who I was in the moment with the promise of all that I could become. She taught me even the darkest sky can be shattered by light, that no matter how ferocious the storm, the calm will always come. So I took what she gave me, poured it like liquid steel into cavities left by others until I became stronger than I ever thought I could be. But as I stand here, I still feel it. The dryness in my mouth, the pooling of blood in my fingertips, and your expectation is clinging to my skin like salt. So I will anchor my feet. I will square my shoulders and lift my chin the way she taught me, because you need to know, if you have ever felt it, the nausea in your stomach, the battering of your heart, the crackle of sweat on your back, do not ever let them tell you that it's fear. It is your electricity. It is your superpower. It's your lightning. And if you use it, you will light up the world. Thank you, Maria.
Oh my God, I couldn't unmute myself fast enough. That was delicious, delicious. I'm not actually going to come in for reaction for that at the moment, because what I'm going to do is remove your spotlight for the moment and go to gallery view. So anybody who would like to be on camera and talk and give us some reaction to the session that we've just had. We'd love to hear your words. In particular, David Thompson USA, because we've two David Thompsons, was having lovely physical reactions to the poetry, and I'd just love to hear from you, David.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll have to say this, that the Cathy's poem about dementia, I actually had to get up and walk around because that reminded me of when I was with my first husband who was dying and had dementia for 12 years.
Oh.
And it really brought back a lot of powerful, powerful emotions, things that I had not even, I had pushed back, as we say. Either we push back into our heads so we don't deal with them. So Cathy, thank you so much for that.
Mm.
Thank
It's
you.
brought some healing tears.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And Jody, your recovery poems. Well, I sent you a private message, and I guess you read it, but it was just like, yes, I was there. I know what it's like. It's like, oh my God, this man took my inventory in front of everybody. And it was just incredible. Just incredible. And Maria, you're talking about the mist. We have something very similar here in the States. It's not the mist, it's the sea breeze, the mist that comes from the oceans, and you're walking on the beach and all of a sudden you have all these sparkles of sea water going all over you, and it's very, very magical. So this is extremely powerful and healing session. And I was like, oh my word. And one more thing before I stop talking, because I like to hear myself talk, is that when we're talking, Jody mentioned about the ancient stories and the ancient archetypes and all this. There is a genre, if you wish to call it that, of authors, much like Neil Gaiman, who take the old gods, who are still alive by around, they're just sitting back watching, they're stupid humans, who have been put into a modern setting. There's one book that I have used, and I've told some stories from it, with permissions, naturally, 1,000 Days in Midgard, where it goes back and forth between pre-Christian Norse and into modern times. And there's this wonderful story in which it's set in the modern times, where I don't know if you're familiar with the term a diner. It's a small, okay, I wasn't certain if the word translates or not, in which a waitress is having a hard time with a customer. And all of a sudden, this truck pulls up with 8 wheels, and a man gets out who has a patch over his eye. Well, Odin had a horse with 8 legs. And then he also who gets out is this burly, red-headed mechanic who happened to have tools, one of them being a hammer, out of his tool belt. And they come in and they administer justice, shall we say. So it's not as though they're gone. It's just they're putting in a different setting. So that genre is very, very interesting. And I love Neil Gaiman's American Gods. So anyway, Maria and Cathy and Jody, wow. Thank you so much from this side of the ocean.
I tell you, I can't speak for the others, but having audience reaction is beautiful, because we've been missing it. I've been missing it, So it's when I was watching my fellow performers do their thing, and I was seeing David's body language, I could tell that beautiful reaction was in there, and we call that the dance between the audience and the performer, and I've been missing the dance. So lovely. Thank you so much, David. Janet, you made some really beautiful comments as well, and I was just wondering if you'd like to tell us about the teaching, the teacher thing that you said.
Oh, did I say it? Everything has been very, I don't know what to say. It hurts
Yeah.
And sometimes hurt is good and sometimes it's not. So it's fallen somewhere in between. But I'd just like to say one very small thing about, I was a teacher for a time, and I taught primary. And I used to run a gardening club, which was quite useful for children who had some kind of need to be helped outside of their home. And one we were clearing out an old herb garden. Now, if you've ever grown mint or that kind of herb, oh, it tangles and so on. So we were really getting down to this, and we were pulling it out, and I was having the time of my life. And one lad was standing by, and I said, "Come on, help! Come on, you help!" And he helped, and then he said, "I'd like some of this," and it was lemon balm, which is the same family. And I said, "Well, you can have anything you like, anything." And he said, "I can't, because I don't have a garden." So the answer to that is simply to put the lemon balm in a pot and give it to him, which is what I did. And I did not think, I don't remember what I said to him. I just remember giving him a pot of lemon balm. And I left that school. And then years later, when I was semi-retired, I did some, what do you call it, substitute supply work. And I met him again. And I recognized him, and we had a chat. And he said, "I've done what you said." I said, what do you mean? He said, "Well, I still don't have a garden." What did I say? He said, "You said you have to care." And I thought, "Did I?" He said, "Yes, you have to care. You didn't say what I had to care for, but it must have been the plant. But I remember you have to care." And this is what teachers have to instill. We have to care. It's just so important.
Yeah.
And that's all I really want to say.
That's beautiful, Janet. It reminds me about what Cathy said about seeds. And my name is Story Seeds, my performance name. And that was a beautiful seed. And you can forget what the seed looked like, but you can see the plant when it comes, you know. You can see and what, you know, as teachers and storytellers and poets, we don't know where that seed is going to land or how it's going to grow, you know. You're only thinking about your own seed when you're first putting a story together, but then that can go out and it can touch so many hearts, and it's a little bit like this conversation now. I love this. Thank you, God, for the spotlighting and for us to be able to have a conversation at the end. I've been missing this, you know. So thank you, John Rowe, who is the yes man, because he's like, yeah, let's experiment, let's do it, you know. So David Thompson UK is in the bottom left hand corner there, and he wrote a beautiful.
Hello.
Hiya, David. Lovely to hear you. And I really liked that David is saying he's always making connections for other people. And he said when he heard Cathy and Jody doing their beautiful poetry, he said, "I have another friend. I have a friend who does poetry too," and he was putting it in the chat. So, David, what I would say to you, brother, is invite her along, because you've invited so many people to this. And David, I would just like to really to say how much I admire you. David gets his stories out there, and he has a lovely lady who sometimes helps him with those stories. And I love that this place gives us a chance to experiment with that. So, David, your bravery is amazing, and I love watching that bravery and how you get your story out, you know, and I feel privileged to be in your company.
That what did made everybody many net more at my door. I got large story
Yeah, I know you love
Oh,
stories.
but no, la story.
Yeah, you know, and you get great stories out as well. And I was very struck in the second week of the resilience of stories, how you told us what it was like to be sitting inside your body, David, and for somebody to come and take your lunchbox, you know, and how you went and dealt with that and let that story be heard in the moment, and then also let it be heard here. So yeah, very important to use your very powerful voice, and you do, you know. So thank you, my story son. He's my story son. So now I'm going to go back to the speaker view. I'm going to mute everybody except for John Rowe. So I'm going to ask John to unmute.
That's it. Ah, well, what a night. What a night. And David, I wasn't ignoring you. I will get in touch with your poet friend you put up there. And we'll have another night, which is a mixture of stories and poems, because I think, and maybe just three people. I haven't planned it yet, but we'll do it in a few weeks. It'll be fantastic. But for tonight, it's just been amazing. I can't believe. I think, you know, what part of the strength is. It's kind of accidental how, you know, the cafe has grown sort of organically. The more that's out there on the net, the more I have to think about, you know, different ways of presenting things and what we're actually doing. And I think, you know, like creating special platforms of whatever it is kind of what we do, because it's what I like. I've never been very good at at going the conventional route. That's why people meet me in woods. But so this has been fantastic. And you know, if I had to bottle and say I'd like things like this, I'd like a percentage to be like this, and I'd like a percentage to be like that. And the percentage we've got coming up, because I have to put this in, or else I forget. Is tomorrow night we have Stories of Rags to Riches. I can't remember who's. I know Colin Irwin's coming on to do something. I know Shane Ibbs is coming on to do something, and I haven't got the chat in front of me, so I can't remember who the other person is. And there's Room for More, Rags to Rich, Stories of Rags to Riches, and then on Tuesday. And we're always an hour earlier on Tuesday because it's 5 o'clock, so we can get as many youngsters in as we can. We've got our young international tellers. And that, again, is a favourite night for me. Every night, every week, we have young tellers coming in from across the world. And they just, you know, you just think, well, we can sit back. The tradition is safe. And not that I'm intending to sit back. I've got plans. I came up with another one today. I'm sorry, but how we market it is something else. But it's gotta happen. And then next Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning, because of course things happen in the evening here, which isn't very good for live sessions with Australia and parts of Asia. So 10 o'clock next Saturday morning, and I've got to let the nights on. That's my tomorrow's job. I've got to get my tellers for next Saturday, but we've got Australian and Asian tellers, 10 o'clock in the morning next Saturday. And Sunday, of course, the 7th of March, is our worldwide story round, of which everyone's invited to come on, tell a story, sing a song, show your bum what you're gone. Oh no, that was what Duncan used to say. Come in, sing a story, tell a story or a poem, or just listen. because we do that with in collaboration with Get a Word in Edgeways, and the beautiful Mike Ruster is Mike might object if I call him beautiful. The amazing Mike Rust is comparing that. And moving forward to the next worldwide story round will be on the 21st of March, and it will be our 1-year anniversary for the World Storytelling Cafe. This time, that sort of in a few weeks' time, will be when Mike Wood and Lucy Wood, who are behind all this, got in touch with me and said, could you curate a worldwide storytelling website for us? And of course the answer is yes. So that's where it all came from. So bless their hearts. But for tonight, I think we need one more round of applause for Maria Gillen, Jody Lee, and of course, before she goes back on the night shift, Cathy Carson. See you all.
See you later, guys.
So, thank you, Mike, for coming. Thank you to various Davids and Janets, etc. And I think, I press leave. Yeah, we can do this. Ali, we're finishing.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye, thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all, you.
And of course,
all of
thank
you,
you,
my
Ali,
friends.
for driving the bus as always.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, my friends.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.